Right, welcome back to Turdtowns, the channel that shines a light on the lesser known places in the UK. For good, but usually for bad reasons. Looking to buy a house or take a trip on holiday? We've got you covered, but you may want to avoid the places on today's list. This week we visited Cornwall, probably the most touristy county in England due to its rolling hills, sandy beaches and relaxed way of life. It also has the lowest crime rate in England out of any county. I've been to Cornwall thousands of times on holiday, but have never been to most of today's places on this list. And it would soon become clear why that was. A little known fact about Cornwall is that it's extremely poor. In 2018 it was the second poorest region in the entirety of Northern Europe. It was in fact so poor that the EU contributed €1 billion to their economy since 2000. Not to bring politics into anything, that's just a fact relevant to this video. But let me know, Cornwall voted 56% in favour of Brexit. Did Cornwall make a mistake by doing this? Let me know down below. But anyway, we need to know how they're getting on since losing those funds. So enough boring stuff, let's get into this one. But before we start, make sure you hit like and subscribe to help Turdtowns thrive. Here are the 8 biggest turd towns of Cornwall. Number 8, Launceston. First up, we've got the medieval market town of Launceston with a population of 8,400. Whilst it's not the worst place I've ever visited, we did find some things to make this place dislikable. But first, the positives. It has a castle, but it's more like a turd lump on a hill. And because this is an old-fashioned place, at least it has its own unique look. You can also snap up a house at a price which is some of the cheapest in the county, an average of $231,000. Another positive is that it's connected pretty well on the road network. That's the good news, now for the bad news. It has nothing to do here. If you're in Cornwall, you're likely a tourist, but trust me, you won't find anything to entertain you here. That is unless you're into drinking, because there's a lot of pubs which contributes to its rough atmosphere. The people here are just not nice and won't welcome visitors. They aren't that used to them anyway. And good luck finding somewhere to eat if you don't like kebabs. If you come on holiday to the north of Cornwall, you'll likely end up in Launceston. Many times, because Launceston is one of the only places in Cornwall to have a 24-hour supermarket. And you just know when you're camping, you're going to forget something essential and need a supermarket. You might call this a positive in Launceston's favour. A Tesco. You know you're scraping the bottom of the barrel when Tesco is your town's claim to fame. Number 7, Quay. The most famous entry on today's list. I'm sure you've all heard of this famous tourist destination. Quay is a town with a population of around 20,000 that seems to fluctuate during the summer due to all the second homeowners here, and it's on the northern side of Cornwall. Quay is most famous for its boozy stag do's, cheap rundown hotels, and chlamydia. Now that being said, I do like chlamydia. Wait, scratch that, I meant Quay. A lot of the Cornish seem to rank Quay as the worst place in the county. It just isn't. There's actually things to do here like zoos, cinemas and more beaches than you could ever need. And the beaches are actually nice. On top of that, Quay is not run down like the other places I've visited today. Perhaps it's one of those places that's great for a day out but you wouldn't want to live here. That seems to be backed up too by the crime rate here, which is 69 in 1,000, which compares poorly to the incredibly low Cornwall average of 40 in 1,000. I'm assuming a good portion of those crimes are caused by drunken tourists. Either that or the pasty shops are an easy target. The shops could be better here, it's mostly tourist stuff, probably not much use to the locals. There's also a pedestrianised area through the high street which has these weird automatic bollards that rise out of the ground. My friend was taken out by one of these which got us laughed out of the town by the locals who are in good spirits. The average house price here is $333,000, which is below the average for the county, but it's expensive for this list. Speaking from experience, the roads are a nightmare here in the summer, so that would be pretty inconvenient if you lived here. But overall, we can't find that much to say other than the fairly high crime rate, and of course the out of control stag do's. Come on, just watch the rest of this video, there's no way Quay is a worse place than the following places. Let's all take a breather and say something nice about this place. Quay is St Ives on crack. Number 6, Penzance. Number 6 is Penzance, the most westerly major town in England with a population of 20,000. Admittedly, I went into this one expecting it to be worse than it was. It was almost a pleasant surprise to find that there are some enjoyable things to find about this place. But there were also signs of the struggling Cornwall that I'd heard a lot about. First, the positives. There's pretty good transport links here considering it's like the end of the world. Major trains run from London to Penzance, so it's an easy escape, as long as you can afford the extortionate rail fare. I was bored, so I looked it up. If you want to go to London and back on a Monday, the cheapest I could find is £136. But that's not Penzance's fault. It also has a small airport nearby which flies to the Isles of Scilly. If you can afford that, I highly recommend it. And the A30 is fairly decent nowadays with all the works done to widen the road. Also, Penzance is pretty nice if you get away from the port area. You could almost be at a popular holiday destination here with some of the views you get. The main street isn't great here, but I wouldn't call it run down. I've certainly seen worse. And there is some out of town type shopping here. So Penzance isn't a failure. But if you visit Penzance, you'll quickly find it's not really a holiday destination like 95% of the other Cornish towns by the sea. There's no beach here and no overweight red-faced screaming brats clutching onto a cornetto. Some of you may view that as a good thing. We did find out that statistically some of the worst estates in Cornwall exist in Penzance. Trineri is often in the news, so we visited and found friendly, welcoming people, and the majority of the people were making efforts to look after their houses and make them look the best that they could. This was possibly a case of more media exaggeration. We actually found the estate up by the hospital to be much worse. We saw our first boarded up houses of the trip and did not feel welcome on this estate. Seems there's an awful lot of poverty here for a place the size of Penzance. Well, you'd think that, but somehow Penzance has the high average house price of $349,000, which I must assume is pushed up by the Londoners using Penzance for its transport links. I don't hate Penzance, but that price is way too high for a place like this. It's not the sort of place you'd want to brag about living in. Penzance finished the year as the 6th most dangerous town in the county with a crime rate of 59 in 1,000. There are a lot of drug problems here, so I guess you could call it the Western Supermare of Cornwall. Maybe they should put that motto on the sign into the place. Number 5, Redroof. This is a town of a population of 15,500 and it's located in the middle of Cornwall. Redroof was probably the least inspiring place I've ever visited. I genuinely started questioning my own existence as I walked down the bland streets. Why am I here? Is this all a waste of time? Will things ever get better? Well, probably not, because this is a mining town that died on its ass when the mines closed. There used to be lots of tin and copper mined in the area, and this is why the motto of Redroof is the heart of Cornish mining. Well, if that's the case, I guess Redroof no longer has a heart. When the mines closed, many of the inland towns and villages suffered. It's not as if Redroof could rely on tourism like other parts of Cornwall. Nobody would want to ever visit here. Admittedly, this is not the most run-down place I've ever visited. Don't worry, we've got that coming later in the video. There's still nothing here though. This high street is worse than nothing because it gives you hope only to realise it's a waste of time. Redroof was one of only 10 places in the UK to receive money to fix up its high street recently. But from what we can tell, they wasted all the money on weird statues. Why are there statues of what looks like half deers, half walking boots? What's the relevance? I don't know. Redroof has major problems according to the people that live here though. Last month, a group of teenagers wrote to the mayor telling them that they were scared in their own town. We wouldn't call Redroof particularly scary. The scariest thing is the way a lot of people look here. Must be something in the water. In fact, 1.5% of the people who lived here would describe their health as very bad. Technically, the crime rate isn't even that bad. Here it doesn't even crack the Cornish top 10. It just has to be one of the most boring, dull places I've ever visited. If you also want to be bored, you can nab a house here for the average price of $242,000. And that could possibly be a good price as the nearby tin mine at South Crofty is set to reopen, which could only be a good thing for the area. So we'd say that whilst Redroof is heartless, it isn't hopeless. Just make sure not to look anybody in the eyes here, because if you got a quid for every time they look back at you, you'd have 50 pence. Number 4, Camborne. Camborne is the second most populated place in Cornwall with around 21,000 of the most desperate Cornish souls calling this home. Unfortunately for us, it's just a short jump from Redroof. In fact, Camborne is just 3.5 miles away from Redroof, and as you might imagine, many of the same problems which affect Redroof affect Camborne, except it's apparently worse. Unlike Redroof, Camborne has had a fair bit of media coverage lately, and not for good reasons. The poorest estate in Cornwall is located in Camborne and it actually ranks in the top 2% most deprived in the entirety of the UK. To go along with that fact, Camborne has the 5th worst crime rate in Cornwall. That is actually quite surprising to me, as you'd think with levels of poverty this high it would lead to the highest crime figures. But ultimately it's pretty poor here and there is some crime. And for all those fun and games, you can pick up a house for the average price of $221,000. But you would have to tell people you live in Camborne, the poorest place in Cornwall. That leads me on nicely to talk about the media. I do believe it's another case of the media trying to turn nothing into a story. It really wasn't that bad here. Camborne was better than almost every place we visited in the Welsh Valleys. Maybe that should be their town motto. Whilst Camborne is by no means a place I would ever want to visit again, don't believe the media hype because it's just a run-of-the-mill below average place. You won't find Oliver Twist types begging for a bowl of gruel outside Wetherspoons, but you will find a place that's so pointless it would be better off not existing. Number 3, Liskeard. The very first place we visited on our Cornwall trip, and it has to be one of the worst. Liskeard has a population of 10,000 and it's 19 miles to the west of Plymouth. It's a pretty dreary place. It's difficult to find anything positive to say about Liskeard, so it's easier to pick on the negatives, of which there are several. The place is run down and many of the shops are boarded up. The place is full of poverty and desperation, but the very worst thing about Liskeard is its crime rate, which is the worst in the whole of Cornwall. It has a shocking crime rate of 95 in 1,000, which is miles above the Cornish average. This really is bad for a place its size. It has double the amount of crimes committed that Falmouth has, a place which is double its size. The main problem here seems to be extremely bored people. There's just nothing in Liskeard. It feels like a place on the edge of death. The town has an average house price of 234,000, which is what you would expect for a place with no amenities and high crime. But I guess those bored troublemakers will soon be having their lives turned around, as the government recently announced they'll be spending 850,000 fixing up an old library into a state-of-the-art facility. The only issue I can find with that is that most of the residents of Liskeard would have to learn to read in the first place before using this place. Maybe turning it into a state-of-the-art cinema would suit the sort of people who live in Liskeard town a bit better. Number 2. Bodmin. Next up we have Bodmin, a town with a population of 16,000. A place that's situated smack bang in the middle of Cornwall. Bodmin is perhaps most famous for its jail, sadly no longer in use, but if it was, we have a feeling it'd be very busy today. Bodmin is grim, and when I say grim, I mean really grim. To smile would feel out of place in Bodmin. A vile town centre surrounded by steep hills on both sides with some of the most disgusting mould-covered houses plastered to the sides of the hills. And yes, some of these vile rabbit hutches were boarded up. You know you're in a place which is struggling when you see that. The town centre felt very Welsh Valleys, a long street with nothing but boarded up shops and depressed looking locals. One of the most sorrowful high streets in existence. At least the parking was only 90 pence, but if you ask me, you'd be better off using the 90 pence to drive up the hill and out of this dump. If you would prefer to stay in this rundown hellhole, the average house price is 246,000. But think long and hard, because the estates here are truly downcast slum housing. The highlight of our visit was a strange man loudly chanting and washing himself in one of the local fountains. I know we're in a cost of living crisis, but your water bill is not the one to fear. What drugs was this guy on? I couldn't tell, but I doubt he's the only person in this town with this mentality. If anyone who's watching knows who this man is, come on, get the geezer some help. We shouldn't have people wandering around our towns unassisted like this. The guy clearly needs some help. Bodmin has the third worst crime in Cornwall with a rate of 68 in 1,000, and it seems to vary over the years. Some years it is one of the most crime-filled places in Cornwall. Another strong case for reopening the jail here. The Cornish locals have a saying to describe when someone is crazy. They say he's going Bodmin. Based on the evidence we saw today, that's a very appropriate saying. Number 1. St Austell. Wow, I hate this place so much, and this was a bit unexpected. I thought St Austell was a touristy place. We thought we'd pass through and cross it off our list. But we soon realised we couldn't have been more wrong. St Austell is a grimy, filthy, depressing, bleak cesspit of humanity. In fact, it's so bad that I would say it's just like the places we found in the Welsh Valleys. Appropriate because it's a former mining town. It really was one of the worst places I visited since making these videos. We'll get into that, but first, St Austell has a population of around 22,000. It's heavily debated on what is the most populated town in Cornwall. I couldn't reach a conclusion, but it's definitely in the top 5. Some people say it's got the highest population in Cornwall, but I can't agree with that statement because I don't think St Austell should win at anything. Talking of population, let's talk about the people who live here. St Austell was the only place on our travels where we didn't feel entirely safe. You could just sense sets of beady eyes staring at you through hedges. It did not feel like a place that's used to welcoming outsiders. On 3 separate occasions we saw drug use out in the open, and we're not just talking about a bit of smoke either. I'm sure the local Christian population would be thrilled to see how their premises is used when they aren't about on Sundays. One resident complained that they were sick of the human defecation in the churchyard and the open drug use in the shop doorways. The heroin use in St Austell is out of control. It's so bad that shops somehow have to lock their customers inside for their own safety. An online petition was set up to force the government to address the drug problems here, but it sadly didn't reach the 10,000 required signatures. Probably because half the town is in such a drugged up state that they pawned their devices a long time ago to feed their addictions. The local population are clearly spending their hard-earned funds on means to mentally check out of St Austell and therefore not in the shops. Which of course in turn means that the shops are a run-down mess, on a par with the Welsh Valleys. It's so depressing here. Why would anyone ever want to live here? Well, a decent amount of people seem to choose to live here, and you can do that with an average house price of $317,000. That is probably the most overpriced I've heard during my entire time doing this. The town is a vile dump and it should be 100k less. In St Austell's favour, I don't know, it's not far away from the sea despite not actually being on the sea itself. And it does have some things to do for the locals, even if they are all housed in decaying, rotting buildings. But overall, the whole place needs condemning and knocking down, because no unsuspecting tourist should ever have to suffer the displeasure of wandering into St Austell. It's a desperate kind of place that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Sort it out, because this place is as bad as anywhere I visited on this channel so far. And that's it, the 8 biggest turd towns in Cornwall. Do you agree with our choices? Have we missed any places out? I cannot stress enough how important it is that you like and share this video. It's extremely time consuming and expensive to do these trips. By liking, commenting and sharing this video, you're enabling us to travel around more and put out more videos. So like, comment, subscribe and help Turd Towns thrive.